Our first reader tonight, Nona Kaspers. She's reading from her new book, The Fifth Woman, a novel in stories from Saraband Books, 2018. It was selected by Stacey D'Erasmo for the Mary McCarthy Award. The story Frontiers was originally published in Cimarron Review and was selected by the Best American Short Stories as a distinguished story of 2016. Publishers Weekly says, The Fifth Woman is a gem of a collection and a transcendent portrayal of bereavement. Kasper's other books of fiction include Heavier Than Air, which is available on Amazon. Is that the one? And it was awarded the Grace Paley Prize in Short Fiction and listed as a New York Times Book Review Editor's Choice. And Little Book of Days, which is, I have that, it's a beautiful book. It's for sale up front also. In 2013, she co-edited with Joel Hallowell a book of oral histories, Lawfully Wedded Wives, Rethinking Marriage in the 21st Century. Her work has been supported by a NEA Fellowship, a San Francisco Arts Commission Cultural Equity Grant, and many more. She is a professor of creative writing at San Francisco State University, where she lives with her little old dog, Edgar. And please welcome a really wonderful teacher who I had the pleasure of studying under at San Francisco State, Nona Kaspers.
Walkers are sexy these days. Did you know that? So, I do live with a little 16-year-old going on 17-year-old dog, and she's in the last year become mostly blind, mostly deaf, which I forget all the time, so I'm always talking to her, and then I'm thinking, hey, you can't even hear me. And then, and she has decrepit elbows and a decrepit spine, so she looks like a raccoon, right? And I just love her madly. Do you ever feel like that, right? It's crazy. I just love her madly. And I'm just waiting. She's kept me company through this book, through all of the books, actually. And the book is partly dedicated to her. And I'm going to read one of the pieces I'm going to read. They're mostly short pieces. And I'm going to read, one of the pieces I'm going to read is dedicated to her, though don't get too hooked or attached to any kind of literal connection, all right? Two clean things. There is a kind of wailing that sounds like singing. It comes from the hollow parts of the skull and from the roots of the hair and even from the thumbnails. I was living in a third-floor studio apartment on a block that was said to have had the highest crime rate in the city. Even on the third floor, the landlord, who lived across the country, had placed bars on the windows. Some of the bolts attaching them to the building had rusted and broken, and so bars were missing here and there. Whenever I left the building, I wore an oversized coat and knit watchman's cap with my hair shoved inside so you couldn't tell I was a young woman. There was an alley off one side that the tenants unironically called Toilet Alley, and it was also useful for selling drugs and sex, dumping garbage, and occasionally, or so I had been told, for dying. I had moved into the apartment over the alley after Michelle died. I wanted to live alone. I wanted to be alone. And after 3 months of looking, I realized a place with bars on the windows and stains on the carpet was all I could afford. Across the alley stood a rooming house. My apartment over the alley had one window that faced the alley, and for 2 hours on late afternoons, the sun blasted through. Monday through Friday, I walked up Market Street to my job and down Market Street from my job. On weekends, I worked on my literature thesis. At night, I ate at my table and read stories and listened to the alley people's bowels and moans and whispers. and there were sounds that defied language, sounds I've never heard again. There was a man I saw most days in the alley in the morning as I walked out the front door and turned right toward Market Street, and he was gone in the evening. He wore a buckskin jacket, and his face was lobster red and pocked with deep marks that I could see even from a distance. "Good morning," he said cheerfully every time he saw me pass. He was sitting against the building usually, or leaning up against it. I said nothing, not because I didn't like him or had a particular attitude toward his presence there, but because the morning often comes to me like a box of puzzle pieces without the box. It takes me until noon to construct any reasonable or recognizable landscape. Some days I would attempt language. I would lift my head slightly and open my mouth. He seemed to understand. He would put up one hand. Once he said, "It's all right." "Good morning," he said one morning after I'd lived there for a few months. And then he said, "Wait, wait." I stood on the street. A pair of men's underwear, so clean it must have fallen out of someone's laundry bag, lay crumpled to the left of my foot. "Come here," he said. "Just come close enough so I can toss you something." The day was so cool. Usually I didn't notice things like that on my walk to work, but the stopping made me feel the coolness of the air. I pulled my watchman's cap down over my ears and backed up a few feet. The man crouched in the entrance of the alley about 10 feet away from me, his back against the brick. He had one watery gray eye, tender and whale-like. I was surprised to see that the other eye was missing, but I couldn't look long enough to create a memory and describe it now, except to say there was wrinkled skin where the eye should have been. How had I missed such an injury? Later, he would tell me he had a sister in Berkeley and cousins in the city who owned a gas station. And when he was a kid, he worked there. He became addicted to the fumes. He sat up and threw something, and I instinctively reached for it. It was clean, a stuffed animal, a little donkey with gray haunches and a white belly. A name was stitched into the belly with red thread. "Are you Russell?" I asked. "No, I'm Zach." There was a tree on that street, a fat, happy ficus that blew and blew in the wind, and the sun rose from behind a building and cast the tree's shadow, a thick branch, over the man so suddenly. And then a big leaf cast over and covered his red nose, and leaves rippled over his buckskin jacket, and he looked at me with his one eye, squinting in the momentary sun. "Thank you," I said. He pulled his coat up over the back of his head, making it into a shelter, and the tree, that marvelous, oblivious beast of rubbery green leaves, grew fatter over the years and is still there. The dog. Every day during the summer, at about 3 o'clock, a shadow shaped like a dog appeared on my writing table. It was a small dog. I could see the head, the 2 pointed ears, the fluffy tail. The dog sat across from me at the far end of the table and then slowly approached until it disappeared at 6 o'clock. I couldn't locate where the dog came from. It seemed disconnected from the dark rooming house across the alley, from anything in all the inhabitants' bleak, dusty windows. I know this lack of source makes the dog unreal, but the dog was as true and constant as anything else in my apartment. I waited for the dog to arrive, and when it did, I would sit working on my thesis with the dog for company. But some days, the dog felt like a bad omen, a nomadic wraith, and on those days, I felt as if my apartment had somehow detached from the center of things and were floating somewhere to the left of anything that mattered. I suppose I could have experienced those days as freedom, but I didn't. Other things appeared in that apartment over the alley. Once, returning from work, I found a piece of paper near an open window with a handwritten verse on it. The merrier we be, the sunnier we see, and blinded by the light becomes a melody. The writer had scratched out melody and written tragedy. Another time when cleaning, I found a multicolored rubber ball under the couch. A week later, a child's sock, though there were no children in the building or in the rooming house next door. In fact, I don't remember seeing a single child the 3 years I lived there. The sock was lime green with a picture of a horse face over the toe. If you put your hand inside, the horse's face bloomed into 3 dimensions and stared at you under droopy lashes. Another time, nearer the end of my stay, the sudden smell of lilacs hit me as I walked through the door, again with no apparent source. Some days, the dog appeared to be sitting up, alert. Other days, the dog's head hung low. Still other days, the dog seemed to be sleeping, its head resting on its small paws. One day, the dog appeared with only one ear. I didn't notice the missing ear immediately. It was only when I looked up a 3rd time during the middle of a long and arduous thought that I saw the one ear clearly sticking up and the other ear gone. The next day, half of its tail was missing, leaving a fluffy stump. The next day, it seemed to be missing a paw. That night, in my bed, I began to imagine the dog outside my apartment, roaming the streets and scavenging, sleeping in doorways or maybe in alleys. I lay awake worrying about the dog, but of course there was nothing I could do, and I knew the dog wasn't real and that there were real dogs out there getting hurt, and I should worry about them. Nonetheless, I worried about my shadow dog. I woke in the morning late, took a shower, and read another book. At 1 o'clock, I sat at my table and tried to write, but I couldn't concentrate. I began instead to think about the dog. I had read an article about dog fighting in the city, about gambling rings and people who stole dogs off the street and out of cars to use for these fights. I imagined a basement with concrete floors and oil stains and a walled arena surrounded with chairs, the men in t-shirts smoking and drinking whiskey. And I imagined my little shadow dog in a cage in the corner, sitting quietly, shaking. That's where I had to stop. It was too sad. I had imagined the dog in the worst situation, but I could just as easily have imagined it roaming through the park, sniffing eucalyptus leaves, sleeping under the trees and stars. At 3 o'clock, the dog appeared with one ear, half a fluffy tail, all 4 paws intact, and a shorter snout. But it looked content, its head tilted to one side. I was happy to see it. I said, "Hello," and then I went back to work. And now the apartment was brighter. There was a glow in my small room, as there always was when the dog appeared. Every time I looked up, the little dog was there, in its own way steadfast. Just as the air began to thicken and prepare for dusk, the dog vanished, and I wondered what shape it would be in the next day, what it would be missing, or if it would appear at all. What kind of suffering are we off to? What kind of joy? The cat. You're going to be here all night because I'm covering all the animals, okay? Every single one. The cat. We called her in our mind the cat. The cat belonged to no one and everyone in the apartment building, though we never spoke about her, only later we did. Her bowl and water dish near the stairs in the first floor her bowl and water dish sat near the stairs in the first floor lobby. If the bowl was empty, we put food in it. If her water dish was empty, we filled it. The cat was black, but not strictly black. When she lay in the sunlight, one could see a maroon sheen. The cat was maroon and marooned. She didn't seem to mind. She lay around on the hall carpet, rubbed against our banisters, doors, and legs, sprinted up and down the stairs. She never complained vocally. She stayed mostly on the top 2 floors, with forays to the first floor. Once, early on, she came inside my apartment, but only after I coaxed her with tuna. Later, I learned nearly all the occupants had coaxed her inside their apartments at one time or another. She sat next to me on the sofa while I stared out the window for a few hours, and then I stopped, and she pawed the door, and I let her out. Sometimes in the morning when I opened the door, the cat was waiting outside. She escorted me out of the building, and when I came home, she escorted me back up the stairs. On my last day in the building, everyone's final day, in the middle of the afternoon, about a month before the building was sold and torn down and replaced with a fancier building none of us could afford to live in, the cat began to meow. It started as regular meowing, but then grew louder, homing in on a low note, trilling up and ending on a high one, or starting high and ending low. Over and over, walking up and down the hallways. I went out for a burrito and came back, and there was the meowing, even louder, like a kid who's discovered a new room in her throat. It went on into the evening. I heard doors opening occasionally and tenants mumbling. At 9 o'clock, I heard a door slam. Then the meowing moved to the basement, which muted the sound but made it more haunting. It mixed with moaning from the alley. The moaning made a bass line, and the cat's song rode up and down it as if the aria were blessing the moan. The notes rang out into the alley and street and wafted in through our windows. They seeped through our walls. I tried to sleep, but I could hear things in the song. At first I heard a stream trickling down a mountain, then a young Bulgarian woman keening on a rock, then a train in the distance, a metal door opening, a factory assembly line belt, a ship's whistle, a Cantonese folk song, a human cannonball shooting out from a cannon. In the middle of the night, it stopped. I sat up in bed. For the first time since I'd moved in, all was quiet. None of the usual sounds in the hallways, no mumbling, no doors opening and closing, no rotted wood boards creaking. The building was slowly caving in. The streetlight shone in through the window. In my bedroom on the wall, across from the foot of my bed, I saw a water stain I had never noticed before, a rusty bell shape with tendrils like an upside-down jellyfish. I watched the bell contract and the mouth open and shut. I watched it glide across the wall, and I began to wonder what the people in other rooms were seeing. Were they awake and staring at their walls? I wondered what the world would look like the next morning when we all woke up. And thank you to Jean and Carrie for all the work they put into these beautiful readings.
Thank you so much, Nona. Wonderful. I'm also a big fan of Little Book of Days, which I do think is a beautiful book. And so we have both of her books available. She has more too, but we have at least 2 of them available today. So our next reader tonight is a poet, and her name is Deborah Kennedy. Deborah is an author and artist and recently published her first book, Nature Speaks, Art and Poetry for the Earth, with White Cloud Press. We have that available also on our book table. The book is the result of 10 years of work, and she's honored that it has been recognized with 5 awards, including the 2017 Eric Hoffner Book Award, shortlisted for the Grand Prize, and a 2017 Silver Nautilus Book Award for poetry. Deborah is active in the poetry community and has presented to numerous groups, including her local poetry group, the Willow Glen Poetry Project, Poets at Play, and an ecological and spiritual group, or groups, I guess. This spring, she'll be teaching a poetry workshop with Poetry Center San Jose, and will also be a featured reader at their Well-Read reading series in May, and we're happy to have her here also. So welcome, Deborah.
Thanks so much. Nice to see everybody. And thanks also to Carrie and Jean. It takes a lot to organize these things, and been doing it for 10 years. Amazing. What a wonderful gift to the community. So I'm going to be reading from Nature Speaks, and I just got my 6th book award. What's a girl got to do? I don't know. So the first poem I'm going to read is a narrative poem, and it's called Coevolution. And it tells a story from Darwin's life, Charles Darwin, the great naturalist. And so, the way my book is set up, there's an illustration and then a poem. And so this is showing the orchid and a hawk moth here that this story centers on. So he saw this orchid, and it has these green spurs hanging down. And this was part of his dawning awareness of the idea of coevolution. Darwin walked beneath iron arches and crystal sky, the dangerous liquid scent of distant jungles hanging heavy in the proper London air. In Kew Gardens, the conservatory, a cathedral grand dedicated to botany, he gazed upon the Star of Bethlehem, an orchid exiled from the heights of Madagascar. Each petal carved from ivory's gleam, blooming in the velvet night. Beneath the celestial petals grow strange spurs, nectaries, green whips hanging 12 inches long, tips wet with juice, the honeyed lure. From the negative, Darwin saw the positive. He wrote, "Good heavens, what insect could suck it?" Only an insect with a proboscis, a nose improbable, 1 foot long. His revelation met with waves of ridicule, crashing from Britain to the continent. Laughter rippled for 40 years until the night an entomologist with animal eyes, silently waiting high in the trembling jungle, captured the shadow of the hawk moth. Its shaggy wings, 8 inches wide, beat through layered leaves, following the scent of musk. The hawk moth hovered before the radiant star, its slender snout coiled tight, unfurled its length, probed down the orchid's spur, sipped the nectar, and bore away a fine coat of pollen. Darwin's vision, a spark through golden amber, orchid and moth in eager embrace, two bound as one across eon's arc. So I'm writing about coevolution because I think if we understood evolution and our own evolution and our relationship to the rest of the world, we might live in profoundly different ways. The second poem I'm going to read is called Double Vision, and here's the illustration. I feel like a first grade teacher here. Yes, there it is. So this is an image. It's double vision, so it's a 2-part poem. The first part of the poem is my memories of standing in the Pantheon, the great ancient Roman temple. The inside of it is almost a perfect sphere with an oculus at the top 28 feet wide. I think they were building a model of an eyeball. I've never read this, but it's looking up to the sky, right? And the second part is in my own backyard, looking up at an ice halo, We get ice halos here in the winter all the time. You may have seen them. It's when there's a thin layer of crystals, frozen ice in the sky, and the moonlight will get refracted into a perfect circle. And on this night, it was right at the zenith of the sky. Double vision 1. Raising crystal eyes to a vestal sky, endless web of Silver Lake blue. Untouched by time but rent by rock, stone arches surge to broken crests, etched and scarred. Wandering tangled streets, chilled water from ancient aqueducts sits like a polished river rock in my belly. Rome, past and present, picked over bones of an endless feast. Entering the sunken stone orb, home to all the gods, the sweeping span leads eyes up to a shaft of light piercing a pounding oculus. The sun coils at my still feet, slowly burning an ellipse into the stone floor. 2. 20 years pass, my feet flat on my own land. The full moon rises to a blazing zenith, hovers at the center of the sky, dressed in sheer clouds, circled by a halo, ice and crystal light. The 9 circles of heaven spin etched against a raven sky. My tender hand, shadow on this sterling disk, feels every echo beat against the stone, bearing swelling life full and aching. Each open eye, each yielding nerve, reaches, straining to see, to hear, the land lying beyond this thin veil, all around the breath of an unheard whispering world. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Deborah. You didn't bring your copper book tonight, did you? Oh, she has this beautiful book made of copper. It would be interesting to see, yes, but also her other lovely book is here, so thanks so much. Up next, we have my friend and colleague, Melody Parker, who's going to be reading some of her fiction tonight. Melody has worked as a freelance writer and has published articles across the Bay Area. She's completing her MA in creative writing while teaching English at San Francisco State, and she recently bought a home with her husband in Redwood City. So welcome, Melody.
Hi, thanks for having me. I have a confession to make. This is my very first reading. So because it's my first reading, I've prepared a song. I'm just kidding. No, this is a flash fiction piece. It's called Elevator Noises. Sean drags himself into the glass elevator at work and hits the G button with his index finger, while his other fingers wrap around the thin black handle of his Valextra briefcase. It's 10 p.m., and most traders have gone home for the night. He's thankful he's just finished his presentation on the U.S. soybean market for the morning. He tips his head down to try and see the ground floor below, but it isn't in sight yet. Unfazed by the height, he can only see the glass floors passing him by. Each office lit with flat-screen monitors in the day, showing the green numbers and symbols of trading figures. But now all are blank white screens in a repeating checkered pattern. The elevator stops 3 floors down, and Sean straightens abruptly as Lydia walks in. Her black Christian Louboutin pumps clicking on the marble floor. He attempts to hide his enthusiasm, but one corner of his mouth lifts slightly. He's wanted to talk to her since he transferred to her division weeks ago. She recognizes her colleague and smiles, waving her eyelashes like dark fans, blue eyes shining. After a few moments, he turns to her. "Bob's got you working late tonight?" "I'm working on something for Trish, so I don't mind." She shifts her knee towards him. "Oh, good. I have to present to Bob and the other execs in the morning, so I'm feeling it." "That's too bad. I had to do the same pitch last year, and I couldn't sleep for a week." She furrows her eyebrows in sympathy. Sean sees his in, and even though he knows he shouldn't get involved with her, he tries. "I would love to get your input if you're not completely done for the night," he asks. She brightens at the opportunity to be alone with Sean and nods her head. "Sure, I think I can fit you in." "Perfect." He struggles not to reveal too much, but his cheeks turn pink. She touches her blue diamond bracelet out of nervous habit. Her mother's gift from Peru when she graduated from business school. She's excited to show Sean her sleek apartment, the view of the city, the balcony, the mirror on the ceiling of her bedroom. Lydia glances at Sean's broad shoulders and admires the Stanley Korshak, a $10,000 suit. She casually undoes her top button, and the air turns thick. Sean's eyes widen, and he forgets to breathe. She lets a strand of black hair fall in front of her eyes. He reaches up to take the strand behind her ear, but stops himself and scratches his head instead, wondering if it's too forward. She decides to give him some encouragement by stepping closer in front of him, still facing the elevator doors. He sees her calves flexing through her black pantyhose. The scent of her hair is in his nose, and he sucks in sweet citrus. He tips his head up, almost dizzy, and sees the mirror on the ceiling. Quickly, he looks away, feeling that he may see Lydia's cleavage. But soon he's not able to help himself. He gulps down some saliva and tips his head back up. She turns her head, and there they are. Her breasts sigh slightly with each breath. The ground floor is approaching, and Lydia steps back to her side of the elevator. She feels something building inside her. Sean reaches for something to say, something suave, something erotic. Lydia interrupts his thoughts with a fart so loud it seems to shake the glass behind them. Both mouths hang open in surprise, eyes wide. The elevator doors ding open. After a moment, Lydia bursts out laughing, holding her hand to her mouth and folding over. She walks out of the elevator, still laughing, and wipes a small tear. Sean stares at the doors in shock and watches as they begin to close with him still inside. He snaps himself awake and pushes the doors open so they don't close on him. He runs to catch up with Lydia, hoping she still wants him over. She sees the black car and stands in front of the door. He opens the door for her with regained vigor. They lock eyes, smile, and Lydia pulls him in by his neck. She presses his lips open, and they kiss for the first time. Sean eyes Lydia's calves again, and she enters the car. Thank you.
Thanks, Melody. I think we can agree that was an awesome first reading. And it never gets any easier. So our second featured reader for tonight is Joey Garcia. Joey is the founder and director of the Belize Writers Conference, where writers vacation with literary agents and learn how to succeed as authorpreneurs. Joey was born in Belize and raised in California. She was a 2017 San Francisco Writers Conference nonfiction finalist and has received a 2014 Pushcart nomination for poetry, 1996 Isidore Palawansky Poetry Prize, 1996 Spoleto Writers Fellowship in Poetry, 1995 Paris Writers Fellowship in Poetry, in 1995 Soulmaking Spiritual Autobiography Prize, third place, among others. She's been published in Calyx, The Caribbean Writer, Presence Journal, Thule Review, Poetry Now, The Farallon Review, and several anthologies, including Bedside Prayers and New to North America, Immigrants, Their Children, and Grandchildren. For over 20 years, Joey has written a relationship advice column for the San Francisco News and Review newspaper that reaches 300,000 people online and in print. She's also the relationship expert for a network television news station. That sounds so fun. Her award-winning book, When Your Heart Breaks, It's Opening to Love, is available on Amazon and at select Barnes & Nobles and indie bookstores and our book table. You can also see her in The Cure, a new documentary directed by Emmanuel Etier, produced by Sharon Stone and featuring philosophers and healers from all over the world, including Dr. Irvin Laszlo and Deepak Chopra. And she has a website also that you can check out. So welcome, Joey.
Did you feel what I felt? Like you wanted to cut that intro in half? No, thank you so much. I'm grateful. And I'm glad to be here. Jean, thank you for the opportunity. And thank you so much, Carrie, for the introduction. After hearing that story, I want to give your characters advice, but I won't. I'm going to read an essay that I've been working on, so it's still a little raw. But here goes. Let me say this. Many of us who write or create art have kind of crazy childhoods, which makes great source material for writing and art. This is called Mother Shit Down. Underground, it's always the same season. In the garage beneath the downtown Plaza shopping mall, the cool air smells of damp roots and benzene. When my cell phone rings as expected, I park my Civic and turn off the ignition. The escalator's skeletal light, caught in my rearview mirror, shines on the driver's seat. "Where are you? I've searched the store twice," my mother shouts when I answer the phone. I'm 47. My mother is close to 70. Her actual age is a mystery, at least to me, her only offspring. It's been decades since I've tried to thresh facts from her mythology. Back in August 1978, I arrived home from a high school summer trip to Europe to discover my mother speaking English with a pronounced Mexican accent. Both my parents are Caribbean. We emigrated from Belize to the US when I was a toddler. "How'd she become Mexican in 8 weeks?" I asked my father. He gestured like Zeus dropping a thunderbolt, as if that was explanation enough. That winter, a woman from Guadalajara moved into our neighborhood. Her arrival gave my mother an opportunity to test the new identity. She invited the neighbor to join us for dessert one evening. As I reached for a second helping of bread pudding, the neighbor spoke to me in Spanish. "I don't know how to speak Spanish," I say. "I'm taking it at school, but we mostly conjugate verbs." The neighbor's face swung from my parents and back to me. "Surely you speak Spanish at home with your mamacita." "My mother learned Spanish in the US by watching telenovelas," I said. She was born in Belize. She's been to Baja twice and to the Yucatan once. We have no Mexican relatives. Joe, my mother snaps at me. My father laughs and winks. My mother began collecting dirty dishes from the table, the porcelain plates clacking a complaint. The neighbor trailed her to the kitchen. My father and I could hear my mother explaining that I was a back-talking adolescent who should not be believed. I gulped for air. Before dinner, I had been reading a tattered paperback of Greek mythology from my father's library. The tale of Demeter and Persephone suddenly surfaced in my mind. Demeter, goddess of the harvest, accuses Hades of kidnapping her daughter, Persephone, the maiden goddess of spring, and trapping her in the underworld. Was the true story of Persephone submerged beneath her mother's lies? Somewhere in the downtown parking garage where I sit, a single sharp beep locks a car. I'm nearly home, I say into the phone. You didn't wait, she hisses. What is wrong with you? She's been asking me some version of this question my entire life. Years of therapy and spiritual workshops taught me that if I'm not vigilant, she'll abduct my autonomy. She'll try to keep me small by diminishing my accomplishments. When I was 30, I organized an exhibition of art by 40 homeless women at a classy rooftop venue. Windows comprised 2 full walls, and the sky shone through as clear and blue as the Caribbean Sea. As I stood in the center of the room being interviewed by a television news reporter, my mother arrived. Walking into the elegant banquet room, she called out, "Joey, oh my God!" Smiling, I turned toward her, thinking she was as moved by the women's art as I had been. Then she added, "Your butt is huge. How much weight did you gain?" People turned away as I sunk beneath the weight of her. Sitting here in the underground parking garage, my jaw tightens around the words forming in my mind. For a second, I worry I'll crack a molar. I'm your daughter. That's what's wrong with me. Earlier that day, my mother and I met at a strip mall Nordstrom Rack, 28 miles from the mall where I am now. She arrived 30 minutes late, calling to me from the automatic doors. "Can't you say good morning? Can't you hug your mother?" There were no other shoppers yet, but employees glanced my way, brows raised at the daughter who failed to rush affectionately to her statuesque mother's side. As I reached to hug her, she said she needed to go 2 doors down to bed, bath, and beyond. "I'll come with you. Stay here. I'll be right back." I explored the clearance racks and wandered the store again. After 30 minutes, I called her cell. No answer. I called again at 11:20, and then I dialed her home phone. I searched bed, bath, beyond. I returned to the rack. Nearly 2 hours later, I made the 45-minute trip back to Sacramento, stopping at this mall near my home to drop off a pair of shoes for repair. A teenage girl passes in front of my car, the enormous white flowers on her dress playing peekaboo behind oversized shopping bags. "I had to buy cologne for your father at the Macy's. Why didn't you stay and shop in Roseville?" "I was there to spend time with you. I don't need anything." "I'm going to tell your daddy you couldn't wait while I bought his cologne." "Fuck! Don't speak to me like that." I hold the phone away from my ear. I rarely swear, but I'm pissed. In the rearview mirror, the escalator lights the ways to stores above me. I could hang up, but I deserve better. I'm sorry for swearing. What I'm about to say is very important. Please listen. Do not contact me for any reason ever again, I say, and then pause for a deeper breath. I'm no longer your daughter. I am not related to you. Light from the escalator spills across the steering wheel. You will always be my child. No, I'm an adult. That means I don't have to put up with the way you treat me. Thank you for everything. Goodbye. I would have bought you something. I step out of my car and take the escalator upstairs. This is what I left underground. A mother who worried aloud that my growth spurt the summer after 3rd grade might turn me into the tallest woman in the world, or in her words, a freak. A mother who would buy extravagant gifts for my cousins at Christmas, laptop computers, flat-screen televisions, cashmere sweaters, and repeatedly give me boxes of padded bras and granny panties from Sears. I'm sorry, it's really funny. While demanding that I open the packages in front of everyone. A mother who watched a relative punch and slap me, then called me into the bathroom where she patted concealer over my bruises and told me it was better for him to beat me than her. A mother who said that to me over and over and over again. When my father had called to ask me to go on that final shopping trip with her, I refused at first, remembering the last outing. We stood in line, my mother cradling $462 worth of blouses, capris, and jackets in her arms that I knew would end up crammed in a closet, tags on, until my father once again demanded she donate the stuff or he would. My mother hoards clothing, perfume sets, affection, power, and resentments. I stepped to the counter to hand the cashier my $12 blouse and credit card. I didn't have to pay for any of this, my mother gloats. My mother gloated, her chin dipping toward her armload. I turned to sign my receipt. Someone gave me a $500 gift card, she added loudly. That's nice, I say, and smiled at her. Who was it? I'm not telling you. Heat prickles my face and neck. I step back, hands flying to my face, feeling as if I'd been slapped. She turned conspiratorially toward the cashier. It was one of my clients from when I sold real estate. He contacted me for a referral. Her shoulders and hips swayed back and forth like a toddler munching a cookie. The cashier appeared delighted to be drawn into my mother's confidence. My embarrassment rose to anger, dropped to hurt, distilled into shame, the mood ring of my childhood. Whenever 3 people are present, my mother turns the other person into her acolyte, even if it's a stranger. People are so dazzled by her attention and Ava Gardner beauty that they seem unaware of having taken a side in her toxic triangle. After our last conversation, my mother would call every few weeks and leave a rambling message ending with the demand that I return her call. I blocked her number. She sent a few letters over the next few months, written in her oversized cursive on lined paper, ripped from a spiral-bound notebook. You need to talk to me so I know why you're mad at me. I don't know what is wrong with you or why you've gone away. I never responded. Instead, I learned to mother myself. On Sunday evenings, I would call my work voicemail and leave voice messages of encouragement, reminders to be creative and not to conform. I cooked healthy meals to show myself I listened to my body. I wrote in my journal daily, letting fear out and joy in. On holidays, I participated in service projects, went on retreats, or accompanied a friend to their family celebration. And I thought about the story of Demeter and Persephone. Its spin, of course, as any daughter of such a mother knows. Demeter wasn't kidnapped. She evolved by traveling between the upper and lower worlds, integrating shadow and light until she learned to mother herself, queen of her domain, no matter the season. Like Persephone, I finally got this mother shit down. Thank you.
Thank you, Joey, and happy birthday. It's Joey's birthday. Our next reader, Tanu Marotra Wakefield, is a poet whose work draws deeply from the American and South Asian cultures. While her poetry most often addresses the music of daily life, she also discovers immigrant voices singing in her poems. This may be because the immigrant story never ceases to amaze her. Her poems have been anthologized and published in numerous journals, including the Chicago Quarterly Review and the Asian Pacific American Journal. Her first poetry collection, The Autobiography of Song, will be published in 2019 by Future Cycle Press, so it will be available in 2019 and We will probably try to have it here at our next reading, or at the reading after that. Tanu earned a BA in English from Wellesley College, an MA in English from Tulane University, and an MFA in creative writing from San Francisco State University. As the former poet laureate of Belmont, California, she engaged her local community with poetry through numerous programs, including monthly poetry nights that focused on the mysterious pleasures of reading poems aloud. Some of these people here know what that's like. I'm not a poet. She lives in Belmont, California with her husband, 2 daughters, and a newly adopted dog. Please welcome Tanya Wakefield. Welcome, Tanya Wakefield.
Thank you, Jean, for the introduction. Thank you, Carrie. This is fun to be out here again. I retired from my laureateship in April, so I haven't read publicly in about 6 months. And yes, it's always difficult every time, but I'm happy to be here. So, there was Halloween, there was the Day of the Dead, and also, I don't know if any of you know, but on Wednesday, there's an Indian holiday. It's called Diwali, which is the Festival of Lights, and a lot of people celebrate it here now. And so I wanted to read a poem about Diwali. In the story of Diwali, the mythological story, there is a woman named Sita. She's married to Ram, and the story emerges out of this epic called the Ramayana. And Sita follows Ram into exile. He decides to leave his kingdom for 14 years, and she follows him, and she stays with him all of that time. And then when she returns with her husband Ram to Ayodhya, that's what Diwali is. And they light up the town, and there's, lights everywhere, and it just lit up. And the story of Sita, though, is really fascinating to me because what happens with her is she's kidnapped by a demon god while they are in exile. And because of that, people want her to walk through fire to take a purity test. And she does that. Ram asks her to do it, and she does. But people still gossip. And so she decides herself to leave Ayodhya again. And many, many years passes, and she returns, and Ram really misses her, and he's happy to see her, and he asks her to come back to him, back to his kingdom. But he asks her, can you just walk through fire one more time for me? Can you take one more purity test for me? And the beauty of this story, which is rarely shared with kids, is that Sita says no. She's born from the earth. She's a goddess that's born from the earth, and she asks the earth to take her back. And so this poem is about that moment. And the title of the poem is stolen from a quote from a Valmiki scholar named Arshia Sitar. She wrote a book for the Ramayana for children. And in that book, she says, "Be a Sita in this world." So this poem is called "Be a Sita in this world." You are not just a follower, enchanted, ravaged, banished. You can choose with a whisper. The earth will hear you, will open for you, no matter how much you have taken from her, the fragrant and the fetid. You can love and still leave. Okay. And this next poem is called Skin Hymn. Hymn as in Hymn, Skin Hymn. Hamilton, you promised me dung for Valentine's Day because it would match my skin, you said, again and again. You sure, really sure you ain't black? From a pool of shame, I tell you, I didn't want black. I wanted the bluest eye, the blondest hair. I took a washcloth to my knees to scrub the color out of them. Hamilton, you sniggered in line behind me with your friends, the spit thickening on your teeth as you grinned. Even now, A slur rises inside me, you ham-bone, pink-skinned scent of bacon. Once I chased you through the schoolyard, shoved you in the back hard. You fell onto the grass, laughing. Oh, I wanted to crack you with my own bare hands. Why couldn't I find your eyes and love the hell out of you? And if there was no love to give, why couldn't I find words like, Hamilton, my color, this brown between red and yellow is cellular, a warm sheath of dung and soil, dirt and earth. Listen for the radiance. And then I have one last poem. It's really great to be here with Nona because she was my teacher at San Francisco State, and she's not only a gifted writer, she is an amazing teacher, and I recommend you all go to SF State and try to study with her. But she is, and I still hear things she would say to me in class in my head, I really do. And one thing she had said once in a class was, "What place do you carry?" And I remember that being affecting me really profoundly, like, what place do I carry? And I think this poem is about that. So this poem is called Elegy for Deerwood. The cicadas roar in the heat as I walk the old neighborhood along Windward Way West, past the country club my parents never joined. I grew up here among golf carts and security guards, swayed to air conditioners and ice makers. But the Florida wild was always pulsing, a pink-throated lizard clinging to a window screen. I am not choosing between the possum at the window and the blue-haired lady in her Cadillac, for both have made me. So did the pungent armadillo scratching the front door, a water moccasin in the driveway, Victor's hand on my thigh. I stumble on a squirrel carcass splayed near a manicured hedge. It's been there for a while. Green blades of grass sprout through its eye sockets. Save me from this undertow. A carpool van blaring The Who, fur and a flake of skin on the rodent's serpentine tail, running through the dunes, the skull licked clean into a smooth white, reading Wordsworth beside man-made lakes, mirrors of blue sky and pine, a trail of ants across the rib cage, Elizabeth treating me to cherry cokes from the club, hissing mailboxes, rolling green, cicada wings, the boys I never kissed, crickets hiding in lawns wet with pesticides and warm rain. I don't know where I am. So I pause, lean into the heat, consider this once wild thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanya. Okay. Tanya Martin writes fiction in San Jose, California, when she's not teaching art to middle school students or working on her first novel, which is, I hope we're hearing from tonight. She enjoys cycling around the Bay Area on her Bianchi road bike. Is that how you pronounce it? Bianchi, whatever. I'm so not a biker. She is co-founder of the awesome Flash Fiction Forum, a literary reading series. Yeah. You've been there, Bob, haven't you? Focusing on short works since 2013, and she helps out as an assistant editor for Narrative magazine. She earned a BS in geology from UC Davis. Her work has appeared in Sugar Mule Literary Magazine, Flash Flood's online anthology, and in the collection Afterlife, Poems and Stories of the Dead, Purple Passion Press, 2015, and now she's also on Tarweed, which is a partner with Peninsula Literary. You can ask me about tarweed, or you guys will all be getting notifications about tarweed shortly. Tanya is one of those people in the Bay Area who's a tireless supporter and promoter of other writers, and she's an awesome writer. Please welcome Tanya Martin.
Thank you, Jean and Carrie. I'm thrilled to be here tonight. It's really fun. Actually, I brought two little flash fiction form pieces to read rather than the novel in progress. Okay, this one's called While You Were Sleeping. From a lonely campsite on the eastern side of the Sierra Nevadas, I lay as still as stone, listening to the screech of metal being torn from our car. Unzipping the tent as quietly as I could, I peered out into the moonlight where a dark, hulking figure stood by the back of our Subaru Forester. My throat was dry and constricted, and I couldn't make a sound. My hands trembled as I zipped up the tent door, hiding behind the nylon wall. And yet you continued to snore peacefully by my side. I woke with a start. I realized I wasn't dreaming. I was dreaming. I was safe at home with you, snoring peacefully beside me. Squirrels raced across the roof above our bed, and I could hear the din of freeway traffic already rushing by like a wild river. The ceiling fan swayed. The room began to shake. A bottle of perfume toppled over on my dresser. And I jumped up and ran to the door jamb where I braced myself. But you continued to sleep. I stood amazed for a moment, and then the room was still again, and nothing was broken, so I climbed back into bed. Then the doorbell rang, and I looked at the clock, and I realized it was 9:30 a.m., and you were still asleep. It rang again, an assistant caller. So I pulled on my robe and padded barefoot downstairs to the front door. I went to the spy hole in the door, and I looked through its fisheye lens to see who was ringing. A group of men and women with pamphlets and briefcases waited on the other side. They were looking straight through me. I was tempted to open the door and ask them if they had felt the earthquake, but then I remembered that they only spoke in scripted messages about the end of times. I went to the kitchen instead and made a cup of green tea with honey. At my desk, I was searching for news of the earthquake when I noticed an odd mark on the share curtain at the window. It was in the fleur-de-luc pattern of the curtain below one of the swirls. As I looked closer, I saw it was a pest that had endured from prehistoric times, a silverfish, camouflaging its flexible body into the curve in the pattern. I squashed the creature with a rolled-up magazine. Was our house infested? I would remember to tell you when you finally opened your eyes. I was hungry by now, and I prepared lox and cream cheese on a bagel, and I ate my breakfast outside on the back porch where the sunlight was soft and warm. I wondered when you would wake. It was as if you were hibernating upstairs, conserving your energy for some task at hand, while I contended with earthquakes, evangelicals, and silverfish. A hawk landed on the back fence with a dove in its talons. "Wake up! You have to see this!" I shouted. The hawk turned and looked at me, launched itself into the eye, then dropped the headless dove on our neatly mown lawn. It felt like a bad omen, a reminder of my own mortality and the worry I carried for our planet Earth, and that an extinct humanity leaves its legacy in the Earth's strata, a new epoch defined by a fine layer of radioactive elements, concrete, plastic pollution, and chicken bones. Open your eyes before it's too late, or it will be the silverfish that endures, and maybe the evangelicals. And this is called Brute 33. Sometimes on a crowded subway or in a bar, I'll smell something that pulls me back in time to the late 70s. It's Brute 33, that scent worn by many a hopeful high school boy, and marketed on billboards and TV commercials by football legend Joe Namath. Fabergé made that splash-on cologne, which some guys took to mean they should marinate themselves in it. But no boy wore it as effectively as Danny Blacksmith, who gave me my first real kiss. He was Cherokee, his chest was smooth and muscular, and his hair was long and black, tied back in a ponytail. When he pressed up against me in the stairway of our apartment building, I melted. That drugstore cologne made me swoon. It came in a green bottle, laden with sandalwood, a dash of lavender, and just a hint of jasmine. My 14-year-old hormones approved. There was something in the combination of Danny's regal profile, the strong chin and nose, and Brute 33 that would linger long after he walked away. And then, just when I thought I had a boyfriend, he told me he was going away for a while, and he gave me his ring to keep until he got back. But my best friend was so jealous, she nagged me to destroy the ring, and together we smashed it with a rock. When Danny came back, right away, he asked me for the ring. I said I'd lost it, and then my brute shoved me hard, winding me, knocking me down, and I remember being afraid. Was the ring special? A passed-down heirloom from a relative, or just a black signet ring that he'd bought for himself with his pocket money? I'll never know what the ring meant to him because I never spoke to him again. But Brute 33, it will always be for me that scent laden with lust, a dash of regret, and just a hint of danger. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Tanya. We have one more poet tonight and then our artist for the evening. So our next reader, Bob Dickerson, is a longtime friend of Peninsula Literary and a previous reader, and we just keep asking him to come back whenever he will come and read with us again. So Bob has published poems in Tarantula and the Coffee House Papers and was a featured poet of the week for Nomadic Coffee. He has collaborated. You should ask him about that. It was kind of a fun thing. You could call it. That was where you call a poet. Yeah, that was cool. He's collaborated with New York artist Karen Hatch to create the best-selling Objet d'Art Woodsman. Accompanied by singer-songwriter Ina Johnson on the banjo, he has performed his poetry at Flash Fiction Forum, Peninsula Literary, Willow Glen Library, Peter Klein's Cafe Bazaar Writers Salon, and the annual Beat Poetry reading at the Beat Museum in San Francisco. Bob is currently putting together a chapbook with the working title of Bring Me the Typewriter of Jesus Ponderosa. Welcome, Bob.
Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Jean. Where am I? Okay. So these are poems I've written in the last few months. And I write several poems about Natty Bumppo, who is the hero of James Fenimore Cooper's Leatherstocking Tales, also known as Deerslayer, Pathfinder, and everything. I have no idea why I write about him. He's just an interesting character. I know Mark Twain made fun of him, and I probably shouldn't write about him, but that's the way it goes. So this one I just wrote a couple of weeks ago, Natty, and I apologize to my writing group people. Natty in Chinatown. Okay. Natty Bumppo was lost in Chinatown. He was walking down Ludlow, turning up Canal, sidestepping the homeless, more this year than last. One guy was shaking and screaming, "I'm hungry, I'm starving, please help me, please, mister." Natty gave him a 20 and the man embraced him and they danced a few steps. Behind them, the Metrograph was showing Apocalypse Now. The barker out front growled, Come on in. It's filthy sick. You're going to love it. Bumpo was trying to decipher the chicken scrawl on the Chinatown walls, but the paint, mostly red and blue, some white, was peeling and dripping onto the street as if some giant finger was wiping everything clean, making all the world fit and proper. The finger brushed leather stocking. He was expecting the finger to be angry, full of heat, but it was soft like the caress of the mother he never knew. The meme along the street was "No speak American, please no beat me, not today, not tomorrow, not ever." Tiny waiters were dumping buckets of shredded greens, collards and kale circling through the air like confetti, like ticker tape. Hordes of shellfish were hightailing it for the bridge. They'd heard the Brooklyn kitchen scene needed help. Natty remembered the word asemic. 2 years in art school had proved valuable this night, even if his sense of direction had abandoned him. Where were the woods of his youth, the arrows, the canoes, the French ladies with their pouting lips, the red coats in their abiding arrogance, the bent twig, the rifle shot, the plummet of the blackbirds, their shouts? The buildings along Canal made no sense. They were too close together, too tall, too much alike to understand. Yes, the windows were eyes, but could they actually see? The harlequin on the door posed the question. Natty turned the knob and stepped inside. Okay, so here's another one. Mrs. Pat Nixon takes a Zumba class. And if you're depressed next week, call me and I will play off of this poem or give you something else to calm you down. Okay? So Mrs. Pat Nixon takes a Zumba class. Mrs. Pat Nixon descends the stairs. This hard-working wife in a dress she sewed herself, patched together like Duchamp's masterpiece, step after step after step. She walks like the long camera shot in Hitchcock's movie Notorious, the one that starts high and drifts down where it finally ends on the key in Bergman's hand. Mrs. Pat Nixon is sure she holds the key to unlock her husband. She says he's fun and wonders why everyone thinks all Dick does is mope and plot and drop bombs on Cambodia. No, sir, he can bang the chords to Round Midnight like an old-time stride player. He can sing that barroom lament, One for My Baby, better than Frank. And he can hit a baseball farther than a country mile, all the way from Whittier to Watergate, in fact. The Zumba teacher, a Balanchine devotee, says Californians dance so lightly their feet barely graze the floor. She tells Mrs. Pat Nixon the dances from down below Mexico way, from Cartagena to Cape Horn, favor the weight on your feet approach. Your heel has to be bold and beat time like you're driving the crust of the earth all the way to China. Mrs. Pat Nixon has a problem. How are you going to move when it's Tito Puente blasting away on the boombox? When you've never been to Spanish Harlem, never felt the heat rising up from the hearts, that dance the mambo and the cha-cha-cha. The teacher puts her hands over her head, rolls her arms inside out as if she's provoking the gods, challenging them to be benevolent for once. And then her arms reverse and they spin outside in, telling us there'll be no more lies, just the many truths and forgiveness. The ladies in the class sashay, they dip to the right, they hold each other's hips and form a love train to the left. They jump up, they slide backwards, they skate, they laugh, they howl. Mrs. Pat Nixon joins the party. Okay. And let's do, I write a lot of Westerns. I'm really into cowboys. Crazy Horse is my favorite character, but this doesn't have Crazy Horse in it. This is called Riding. It's for Ned Buntline, who did a lot of paperbacks, Western paperbacks. Loverboy and Rocket Man were never late to the show. Rocket's ears loomed tall like skyscrapers. His belt was notched. Loverboy's ears were more like side flaps on the helmet of a World War I pilot filling trenches with the green gas of hell. Dulce et decorum est. Together they tamed the West, the lonely plains of Nebraska, the hills of North Dakota, the rough and tumble speakeasies waiting for the traveler at Golden Gate. If you ask them why they did it, they say they didn't know. The gals in calico thought it was their hearts that did the choosing. the ones they corralled and killed, the ones they stampeded into the sea, swore it was their hands, quick and hard, gun smoke rising off their fingers. The West is now as flat as Loverboy's ears. Everybody wants Rocket Man back, but the engines no longer work, and the sky seems farther away, however you measure it. And then I'll do one more, maybe. Okay, well, look, I'll do two more then. This is an ode to my dog, Giacomo. I've had lots of dogs. I have a new one named Baxter, who's like a grandson, grandkid. He's, obnoxious and cute as the Dickens, and we let him get away with everything. But this is to Giacomo, and what the hell. Come, Giacomo, come. Let us flee our masters. The spaniels will join us, the fiery terriers also, and the frantic Dobermans. It's the year of the dog. Howl it loud enough for the moon to hear. You crawl low to the ground. The scents abound, floral, excremental, the odor of truck exhaust. A shaggy black and white swath of fur, a fort of pillows surrounds you. If only the enemy had mounted its attack from outside, you would be safe. Your body moves in dreams. Rabbits fly past, memories of a cave. I swear the God of dogs scratches your ears with his left hand, then his right. He calls you his little devil. The west wind is having no difficulty breathing today. Do you want to climb the trees to follow that sparrow hopping beside the oranges that swim in the wind? What about the mouse who lives under the house? Is it the poetry that makes you yelp, or the wind, or both the wind and the poetry? Giacomo, the songs you sing are road songs for travelers. Their melodies outrun their rhythms. You crouch, you flatten yourself, you dance back and forth on the heels of your paws. You are my mirror, I follow your lead. I like how you bark at nothing. I like the wet of your nose and how you stand up and say, look at me. Give me meat and I fill your bowl. Give me water and your journey is a walk in the park. You scamper down the sidewalk, your ears like butterflies refusing to be pinned. Never forget. And then this is to my mom and dad. It's called Stagecraft. My mother played Caliban and my father Ariel. Prospero presents family theater brought to you by Remington Rifles. Every night, my sisters and I would sit lined up on the sofa like good soldiers and smack our hands in glee as we watched their brave new Punch and Judy show. Instead of clubs, they used wit, threats, brute sarcasm. They were juiced, relentlessly upstaging each other, and yes, the curse of biology figured in most of the scenes. Ariel lip-synced to tan shoes and pink shoelaces and then did a prissy knees-up dance the fairies do. Caliban countered by folding the morning paper into a Panama hat and whacking the Sprite. Take that, you miserable pair of bouncing wings. Their words could split wood, break diamonds. Their rage could behead kings, flip paradigms. We loved them and we loved their suburban shenanigans. Clop, clop, stomped Caliban, hooves along the delta. For Ariel, it was white mischief at 5 and pour me another highball. We knew the neighbors could see the house shake, but we were the only ones with front row tickets. Sometimes we even wrote the scripts, built the sets, secondhand doll's house, third-hand Pinter. Here a disappointment, there a pause long enough to wipe the floor, and always pearls for Caliban and a friendly win for Ariel. They were giants, they were heavy hitters. They taught us so much. How to hold our hands just so, how to keep our eyes shut tight and our feet nimble, how to vanish and take off for parts unknown. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob. So we have a final presenter this evening, our artist of the evening, and we're really excited to have Trevelyan Williams here. Trevelyan was actually the artist who first connected us with this gallery Low those 10 years ago, and she's been a great supporter of our series, and we love her art also. So she's going to talk a little bit about her artwork. Do you want me to read from, she had this lovely poetic artist statement. I'm going to read a part of it for you. Involvement in both art and the natural world is my lifelong obsession. Little else offers more balm to my soul than being out in nature. The landscapes and nature of California and beyond currently offer a bounty of inspiration for my painting. Watercolor painting was my first love and still enthralls me. However, I am drawn to all media and seek to represent the natural world and other topics too in watercolor, acrylic, and oil. And Charlene's going to talk to you more about her artwork. So.
So, yeah, okay, good, okay, good. Thank you, Carrie, very kind words. And it is, I was guessing that it was 10 years, and I still remember I was staffing here in the gallery, and I happened to be the chair of the gallery at the time, and there was 2 women in the gallery. They kind of stood in the corner over there, and they were like, and I went over and, people come and do odd things in the gallery. You never really know what sometimes they're just looking for the bathroom. But, these 2 women, and they were, so I went over and they somewhat shyly, I don't know, you were a little bit reticent, I guess, but they spilled the beans on what they were looking for and what they were planning, and that was they needed a new venue, a new location to hold the literary readings. And so we said, yeah, sure, we'll host them here, and it's we need somebody from the gallery always to be here, and it's kind of been my baby, although it's not only my baby. Anne Lambourne is one of our artists who's here tonight, and has helped. We always, take turns in somebody being here, but it's 10 years. I can't believe that it's 10 years that we've been meeting here. I also want to share that as far as the gallery is concerned, and for those of you who don't know the gallery, we are a cooperative. We're about 35 to 40 artists in the gallery, and we have been in existence for 60 years this year. We celebrated our 60th anniversary as Gallery House Art Cooperative here, and that in Palo Alto, and that is quite a feat, really. As you all know, Palo Alto is not the easiest place to rent, but we manage, and here we are. We might not have a solid door into the cafe, but we have a space, and we have a good art space, and I'm happy to be one of the artists here. So just a little bit about my work, and I would encourage you just to go and enjoy all the work in the gallery, and my work and my colleague Martha are featured in the front room. The front part of the gallery, we always have 2 to 4 artists featured every month. We change our work every month. It's Martha and my show. Martha is the person who does the clay prints, the mono printing technique that's on the wall on the other side of me, and I'm the painter. So interestingly, the topic of our current show is seeking refuge, and I felt a resonance with Jean's introduction. You were talking about how we needed to be someplace at the moment, and my feeling, and I think Martha and I both came to the same agreement about calling our show Seeking Refuge from different places, but with a lot of agreement. For me, the seeking refuge part is that every single one of us, we hear the word refuge a lot in current day, and for thousands, millions of people, it's a much more serious issue than it is for me. I'm not in a sinking boat or fighting for my life or being, incarcerated or, horrible things like that, and we know that that's the situation for many people. But nevertheless, for me, I need to stay sane, and to be safe, I need a refuge. And the refuge that comes to me, or that has been there throughout my entire life, are 2 things really, and it's art, being involved in art, doing art, and being in nature. And as I've grown in my own painting, I really try and marry these two things together as, in my expression. And to this end, I just pulled off two paintings. The sort of key painting of this show is kind of a bit of a departure from the rest of the painting. You can see, those of you who are familiar with the Anderson collection at Stanford, that this is a very significant painting, the Christopher Brown's painting. And I was there with a friend, and she was walking towards the painting, and I just thought, wow, that would make a great painting. And it did. I think it did. I'm told that it's okay. But the other kind of significant thing about it is the kind of the attitude of the figures, the many figures, and also the flag, the little suggestion of the American flag in the top there, which are kind of all like, just many suggestions of what might be going on in our world these days, as far as seeking refuge is concerned. And another preoccupation that I have along kind of coming from the nature part is that it's lovely to represent nature. It's lovely as an artist. It's a joy to represent things I see, and I'm particularly interested in the native flora, the indigenous. I'm South African. In South Africa, we would talk about indigenous plants. We don't talk about native plants in South Africa. The words are very, I think they have the opposite meaning here. You don't talk about indigenous plants here. You might talk about indigenous people, but anyway, they're kind of loaded words. But in here we talk about the native flora, the flora that have been here for millennia, and that's what interests me. I'm a little bit of a botanist, is out there, and it's great to represent them. But I like to take. And you'll see this work, when I put it back on the wall, sits adjacent to representations of some of our native flora. But this clearly is an abstracted work. And as an artist, it's a real joy and it's a real refuge for me to take work and abstract it into form elements and color elements and light. And I think those are the things that are just so entrancing and so moving and just really take you places when you are painting or meditating on it. And you don't have to really be painting to be transported when you're out in the natural world. But this, I guess, is the consequence or the product of my being transported to some wonderful place of refuge while I'm out in nature. So I encourage you to enjoy all of the artwork, and happy to have further discussion if anybody wants it. Thank you very much. And I think we should I'd like to just close by giving a really big hand to Carrie and Jean for their 10 years of work. And Bart at the door.
Thanks to everybody tonight. We had such an amazing group of writers and artists from all around the Bay Area. I think we had people from San Jose, East Bay, San Francisco, and the Peninsula, so pretty amazing. And I hope that you'll stay, have some refreshments, check out the book table, chat with your fellow artists and writers. Sign up on our mailing list if you're not already on it. It's over by the book table. And I want to say thanks to our film crew tonight for providing us with this great sound system and lighting and videos that we'll be able to enjoy on our website in the future. So that's a new thing that we have, and it's very exciting that they're willing to donate their time for us. So thank you all. And I know that I probably don't have to say this to this audience, but don't forget to vote on Tuesday, and yeah, we'll go. Bob, it's on Tuesday, November 6th. Okay. Okay, thanks, everybody.